So now we are recording. Welcome, everybody. So hopefully these folks are, now it shows 3 people. And I don't know where the other 4 that were saying they were here went. So hopefully they'll be filtering into this as well. So I'm just going to give us a minute and let people come on in. Oh, there they are. I'm Julie, and I'm the founder of GAMS National Capital Region Military Spouses. And we're just going to chitter chat for a second. Let people allow time to filter into this. And at 7, I will attempt to do this live streaming and see how well my practicing this afternoon went.
It'll be great.
So,
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let's see, I can spotlight you, Angie, and spotlight, add a spotlight. We can spotlight everybody, and then I can take them off, add spotlight. See, there we go.
Awesome.
Very nice. Okay, so we still have 2 more minutes, but this takes me a minute to get everything going. So I'm going to try live stream on custom service. Okay. Go live. And it says it's preparing to go live.
It's always
behind the curtain here.
The fun thing about this is that it tells you it's preparing, but then it already is on live. Okay. Yay. It says it did it. So now I have to go into the event, I think, and set up live video. It takes 5 steps. It's really annoying. Oh, it looks like we're there. So yay, go live now. Okay, I think I did it. I know, I'm like a kid in the candy store. All right. Excellent. All right, so now we're going to start the whole thing over again. I am Julie. I'm the founder of GAMS National Capital Region Military Spouses, and we love to get our local experts and group members to share things that they really know about. And so it was actually a whole year ago that Angie McDaniel reached out to me and said, hey, I have this idea about doing a webinar for self-managing and military landlords and talking about property management, self-management. What do you think? And so now we've finally been able to bring this all together. So thanks for everybody for joining us tonight. We are live streaming this. We are doing this on Zoom. We're recording it, and then it will go back up on our YouTube channel after the fact. So now I'm going to try to do my screen share. All right. Here we go. And present. Lots of clicking. Okay. So again, PCS, proof property management. If that's what you're here for, you're in the right place. Tips for self-managing military landlords, and if you want to use a property management company. I'm very thankful for my friends Angie and Diane for joining us. They're each going to get to go and share about their story and why they love real estate and being landlords and all of that. So is our welcome and introduction. Who are we, right? So if you came to this webinar through GAMS National Capital Region Military Spouses, you know who we are. We're military families. Now, some of you may have found the webinar link elsewhere, and I know that there's some real estate professionals joining us, so thank you for engaging with us. We really appreciate all of you who help our military families with these rentals. A lot of us are first-time landlords based on the feedback we got, some experienced landlords as well. So at this point, I'm going to stop my sharing and I'm going to launch some polls for you guys. And I want to see what you guys have to say. So, all right, it says that I've launched them already. All right, so they are answering them. Okay. I'm going to give another minute and make sure you guys have all answered them. And then I will end the poll and hopefully it'll allow me to share the answers. So we've got still people filtering in because we're just 2 minutes after. While we're doing that, why don't you guys go ahead and give a little quick story share? Angie, why don't you go first?
Sure.
And then then we're not wasting time here while we're waiting for it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll try to make this quick. It's definitely been quite a journey to get to where I am right now and with the experience that I've had. And if I would have had something like this about 25 years ago, I probably would have had a different experience and probably not started Command Properties or Rent Risk. But just so you know a little bit about my background, I'm a Navy spouse. I've been married for 33 years. My husband and I have 5 kids and a bunch of grandkids on the way. And we moved our family 21 times in my husband's naval career. Um, Throughout that process, we became what I like to call as landlords by default. We would buy a house and then, we'd have PCS 18 months later in Navy Service Warfare community, and we would have to rent our property out. So we tried to do that on our own, did not have a good experience. Then we hired a property manager, and that was an even worse experience. And it just over the years, it just kind of showed me that there's a real need in the market for quality property management. So back in 2013, we moved to Northern Virginia, and I just got this wild hair that I was going to start my own property management company and bring the kind of service that I wanted, to people in our community in Northern Virginia. So I launched Command Properties. I was a real estate agent by that time, and since became a broker, started serving other real estate agents with their clients, screening their tenants. And over the past 12 years, we've grown Command Properties to be a very a respected name in property management in Northern Virginia, which I'm really proud of. And also we became known for tenant screening. In the 12 years that we've managed, I've screened thousands of rental applications and managed hundreds of properties. And in that time, we've never had an eviction. We don't have tenants who pay habitually late, and we've never had property damage beyond normal wear and tear. And that's unheard of in this industry and in this business. And because of that, my husband and I, when he retired 4 years ago, we wanted to bring that level of tenant screening. We wanted to teach other people what we didn't know, whether they're property managers or self-managing landlords. And so we partnered with Experian and since have partnered with Plaid, who are industry, huge corporations. And we launched rentrisk.com, which is a tenant screening platform and is now morphing into a self-managing landlord platform where you can not only screen tenants with our model and method, but also do rent payments, and there's a maintenance portal as well. So we're just really excited to be able to take all of our experience and serve people in our community that way.
Thank you so much, Angie. So before I launch the polls, I'm going to allow Diane to do her entry as well to share everything with us about what
Well,
she.
thank you so much, Julie. I appreciate so much that you invited me to speak today and really just to be able to share my experience. It's been a lot of fun knowing you over the years since the very beginning of this Facebook group. And it's really been fun to get to know Angie as we've prepped for this webinar. It's actually really funny how similar our stories are. Started as a Navy spouse, also in the surface warfare community, bought my very first property 17 years ago when I didn't even live in the state that I purchased my first home in. And my portfolio I grew over the years through a combination of, like all of us, PCS military moves, trying to maximize the VA loan, and then also acquisitions with the intent to rent them, just to build a whole other stream of income and to create wealth for my family. And quite honestly, I'd always wanted to be a landlord. I'd always wanted to use real estate as a way to grow wealth. And I found I really enjoyed it. I also kind of perfected my technique where I'm lucky enough to say very similar things to Angie. Never really had to evict anyone, never had extreme damage, always had wonderful tenants who took care of my properties. And a lot of it had to do with the screening process and how I set my tenants up for success and really taking it seriously. Having said that, I really also believe in full service management. In my bio, it talks about I do have a property under full service management, and I absolutely adore my property managers, and they are worth every penny. So I think it's a personal decision. If you want to self-manage, we're here to kind of teach you how to do it. And for a lot of people, the answer really is to be with an exceptional property management company. But however you decide to do this, how you set up yourself and your tenants and how you work with your property management company, I've learned over the years makes such a difference. And it's just great to share with you all.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let me figure out how to share these polls that people have been answering. If I hit end, I think it lets me share the results. Okay. Do you guys see them?
Yep.
Awesome. So I'm going to read them. For those who are current landlords, do you self-manage? That's 64%. Use a property manager, 36%. Have a friend that helps, that's 7%. And used a realtor to list my rental, but self-manage, which is another 7%. And for those of you who, what's your experience as a military landlord? First time landlord, I have all the questions. That's about 28% of you. Not my first rodeo, but I'm still here to learn. That's 50%. So that's pretty good. I'm a real estate professional, but here to learn more, 6%, and other 17%. And I joined today to learn more about, and let me see if it lets me read what the answers are here. Okay, it shares like a word cloud. Do you guys see that on the screen or no? No? Okay. It says Virginia specific landlord tenant law and frequented for advertising and contacting my home, renting my own home, self-managing, best practices, tax benefits and best way to receive the application, allow a pool or one by one, and working with property management companies. So those are what people had to share. So, all right,
Okay,
I'm going to
awesome.
stop on that.
I already see, like, I saw a question drop into the Q&A that is perfect for Angie. I think it's like the topic of our whole talk.
Awesome. So we will get to those Q&As, but you guys can go ahead. If you think of them while people are talking, please go ahead and drop them in, and we will get to those as we go throughout the webinar. So I'm going to turn it over to Angie now and let you take it away.
Yeah, so there are so many things that we can talk about. I'm just going to launch into, a few things. The biggest thing that jumps to mind, and what Diane and I were discussing earlier today, is the mindset that you need if you're going to self-manage. The biggest mistake that I see people make every single day is they don't put their business hat on and approach their rental property like a business. It's an emotional thing. And if you're going to become a landlord, you've really got to detach from that and have a business mindset. And the number one area where I see this kind of play itself out, there's several areas, but the main one, because it's the most important domino, is with tenant screening. People become very emotional about the property, or what happens is you'll get someone who comes to apply. They really don't qualify. Their credit's not that great. They might not even have an income, or they give you a letter, or they tell you a big story about their situation, and people feel bad, and they feel bad where they can't, they have a hard time declining someone or telling them, oh, this isn't going to work. And it used to baffle me why people did that, but I was that person as well. And what you don't realize is that you are putting your own family's finances on the line when you cannot say no to a person. So you need to have objective screening criteria, which is what we do with rent risk and what we do with our properties, and what Diane does when she's screening her tenants. Because if you don't get the tenant screening part right, if that person who is going into your property is not qualified, you're giving the keys, you're basically giving your financial portfolio to someone who's going to damage it. They can damage it by not taking care of the property. They can damage your finances by not paying the rent on time, you having to evict them because they weren't qualified. They had a track record and a behavior pattern in their credit report, for example. The credit report is one piece of tenant screening, but it's the most important piece because it paints a picture of a person's behavior pattern. And that behavior pattern is an indication of how risky they are to you and whether they're going to pay the rent or not, and also take care of your asset. And those are the two biggest worries that people have when they go to rent their property. If you're already a landlord, which a lot of people on this call are, you may, if you've been doing it long enough, you've probably had a bad experience. And if you haven't done it before and this is your first time, those are the things that you're worried about. Are they going to pay? Will I have to evict them? And are they going to take care of my property? So if you can tighten up the process from the very beginning, you're going to save yourself from a lot of heartache. That's really the tip of the iceberg, or the first domino, I like to say, because if that's not right, nothing else is going to go right.
So I've gotten a question in my email, and then we've got a question in the chat, and then we've got a question in the Q&A. So let's go ahead and look at the one in the chat. So I like this one, Angie. It says, thank you guys for the webinar. My question for once you guys get to Q&A is, do you invest in, oh no, maybe this isn't the one I was thinking. Sorry. The one in the Q&A is the one I wanted to do. How do you filter bad property managers or companies from good ones? Because this was something that you put together some questions to ask.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions. I mean, you can go online and go, what should I ask a property management company? And you'll find literally a standard set of questions that you can go through. But some of the things that I think people need to spend more time on would be looking at their Google reviews. And when you look at the Google reviews, you need to actually read through them. Sometimes companies can actually pay for Google reviews. And if you see a bunch of one-liners all the way down throughout their reviews, and they're all on similar dates, that means that the company could have purchased those reviews because they had a lot of bad ones. And then the other thing I would look at is if there is a bad review, which in property management, you're dealing with problems, you're dealing with people's money, both tenants and landlords. And so you will get disgruntled tenants who may or may not be telling the truth, or it may not be accurate. But look at how the company responds to the negative reviews. Do they respond in a very kind and professional way, a very factual way, a very non-emotional way? You learn a lot about a company that way. I would also say go to their website, look at their rental listings. How do they present their properties? What kind of properties do they manage? You can tell a lot about a company and the level at which they manage by how they present their rental listings. So these are things that people don't really talk about. People, will call me and they'll go, how many properties do you manage? Who's gonna, how do you handle maintenance issues? And that's all fine and good. You can definitely ask those questions, but there are, like really look at their marketing, look at how they behave online. That tells you so much about the property. Do they, some really important questions that you do need to ask though is, what are their standards for tenant screening? You're going to hear me say a lot about tenant screening, and you're going to get that's the hill I'm going to die on, because again, that's where a lot of problems come from. But it's the same thing with management companies, is what kind of standard does that management company have? Many management companies have a credit score threshold of like 600, maybe 650. And that, in my opinion, is highly risky. Because again, those people are typically going to have lower credit scores because they don't have a history of paying things on time, or they may have accounts and collections, or they may be highly leveraged with debt, even if they have a good income. So you want to know, what is that tenant screening standard that the management company has? Do you have any say? Are they going to give you a summary report of the applicants where you get to be the one to approve? Because when you sign that management agreement with a company, you're signing over and giving them a lot of authority. And are they going to give visibility on the process of who they're choosing as a tenant, and also who's signing the lease? Are they signing the lease on your behalf? Are they doing lease renewals on your behalf? Or will you know when it's time for that tenant to turn over or for that tenant to renew? Because what I see in practice with a lot of companies is you as the landlord have signed over a lot of that process, and they don't really have to read you into it. They are doing it on your behalf. What I do with Command Properties is we do a summary report of a person. We present that to the landlord. The landlord signs the lease on behalf. We facilitate the process, and the landlords and our tenants don't have communication with each other if we're the listing agents. But we want to make sure that there's visibility. So the landlord signs the lease. When it's time for a lease renewal, we're going to talk about rate. Are we going to raise the rent? Are we going to keep it the same? What is the market rent right now? Do you want to renew these people? We're going to have these conversations. And so there's going to be visibility with our owners because they own the property. We are the stewards of the property on their behalf while they're away. All property management companies don't operate that way. So those are really key areas where I think people could really help themselves a lot if they will just look at those things online and ask those particular questions.
Awesome. All right.
I love the words you use, Angie, like saying that you are a steward of the property. That is it's so great. And it shows how much you care about each of the properties that you manage.
Well, the thing for us is, and this is a really good point to make because, I see this with landlords themselves as well as property management companies. The attitude is it's just a rental property. And therefore, the standards are kind of lower. It's just this mindset, oh, it's just a rental. I don't have to really prepare the property for my renters. I see that a lot with self-managing landlords, that the property's not ready. It doesn't look good. It's not a fresh, clean palette. Coming to Northern Virginia, you are going to be paying, $4,000 or more in most cases to rent a home. You as the landlord and the property manager need to present this home in good condition. And our mindset is that your home is an asset. It's part of your portfolio, just like your stocks and your TSP and all these things that you're saving for your future. Real estate is the #1 wealth building tool out there. You are having someone else move into the property, pay your mortgage for you. The property's growing in equity. There's nothing else that will pay you like real estate does. But you need to understand what you're doing, and you need to have the mindset that it's a business, it's an asset. We must protect the asset. And so that's why I look at it and I use the terms that I do, because we feel a huge sense of responsibility at Command Properties and with rent risk that we are teaching people, we're equipping people, and also anything that's under our care, we do our due diligence on to maintain that, because our owners are counting on us for that. They're overseas. I mean, we're managing not just for military people, but for people in the government, the State Department, DOD, civilians, Department of Justice, CIA. I mean, we manage for all of these people. These are personal homes. Most of our people, we're not managing for too many investors. We have a few, but these are your homes that you have lived in, and so it takes that level of care.
Well, and I think that's an important point when you talk about, because I get frustrated. I get questions. People will ask me all the time, why is my property not listing? And it's kind of what you said, is they're treating it as a rental property, but it is also going to be somebody's personal home. And so you want to present it like a personal home with excellent photos, with a good description, making it a clean, fresh palette. Because if you want to attract top tenants, then you have to have a top product. So for me, I currently own and manage 13 of my own rentals. Well, I guess I manage 12 because one's under full service management across 5 states. And, the average value is north of $700,000. So this is a major asset that I want to protect. So when I'm screening these tenants, I really want to make sure that they're going to care for the home just as much as I care for it. And in my case, I've lived in the majority of the properties, but not all of them. But I want to treat them all like they're going to be someone's home. And from the time somebody moves in, people are surprised to find out I don't actually do annual inspections on my homes. I'm renting to tenants that take excellent care of them, and I want them to feel like it's their home. So can I talk for a second, Julie, about how I screen a tenant?
I want you to do that, and then I've got a question queued up in the email just for you.
Oh, yay. And I'd love to take the one on break even too, because I've definitely
I was gonna send you.
We can get to that one later. I played in all those grounds. So for me, when I always start with professional photos. I list my homes that are in this market. I definitely sneak peek them on the GAMS website. I wish I had a house for every qualified tenant I have, so I try to list them on the GAMS website first, just so military families can take advantage of them. But obviously, not all of my homes are in areas with that type of Facebook group. So then my next thing is I'm going to put it on Zillow. I personally don't take Zillow applications. It's my personal preference. I want to self-screen all of my tenants and I want them to come in. So when somebody emails and says they're interested in a house, every response is identical. They get 12 questions, and Julie can share those with you later. They get 12 questions. Those questions have to come back completely answered for us to move to the next phase. I have the same minimum credit score and income requirements for all of my properties, whether it's a $300,000 townhouse in Florida or $1 million home in Fairfax County, Virginia. They're all the same, and I keep it the same across the board. And then generally speaking, obviously in this area, they rent very quickly, but I know within the first few inquiries who's going to be a well-qualified tenant. And so I'll move forward with those. And obviously the first to apply that's qualified is who I'm going to move forward with, but I don't take the property off the market until I have a deposit and a signed lease. And kind of like Angie touched on, I'm really not interested in anybody's story because let's be honest, I want to believe the best in people. I'm actually probably a little bit naive. And so I put things in place to protect myself from going down the rabbit hole of somebody's story, because anybody can tell you anything and they can make up any story to pull on your heartstrings. So I keep it strictly business. I rarely meet my tenants in person. And I don't hardly even talk to them on the phone. I do a lot of it via email, getting those questions answered and seeing if they meet that right profile. And I have to go back, I can't stress enough, prepare your house for rent like you would a home for sale. Make sure you get great photos, that you stage it, that you clear the clutter. And the great thing about as a self-managing landlord is my photos will last for years. So I don't have to do that with every tenant turnover. My average tenant stays 3 to 4 years, but I can reuse the photos, reuse the Zillow listing. So it makes it very easy. When a tenant gives me notice, even if it's 6 months in advance, I'm listing, especially in this area, I'm listing that property. It's ready to go, and off we go.
Awesome.
And you don't waste your time if
Right.
someone can't answer those questions, that this is the criteria. We do the same thing. It's called pre-screening. So when we get bombarded with people on our rental listings, that people who want to go see our properties, and we take them through those questions. And if anything looks troublesome, or it looks like they won't qualify, we just tell them that it looks like you wouldn't qualify based on what you're telling me. We'll ask them about their credit. It's hard for people to do that if you haven't done it before, but it's okay. You can do it. Remember, it's a business. Don't be emotional about it. You ask them
so important.
With that.
Oh, so it's so important. You've got to be able to talk about money and credit. It's a business and it's an asset.
Yeah. I mean, if someone were to, let's just say, there was some kind of cyber event and they got into your Navy Federal account and took all the money in your savings account, you'd be up in arms. You would do anything to protect yourself that way, right? From any kind of breach in your security or your data, your accounts. It's the same thing. You just have to do that with your house. And it's better, like what Diane is saying, doing it over email, going, okay, here are the things that you will need to qualify for this property. Do you meet these qualifications? Or, and if people say, oh, they do have issues with credit, well, tell me more about that. Do you have late payments? Do you have accounts and collections? Do you have judgments or liens? Do you have any evictions? If the answer is yes to any of that, no way, you don't go forward.
Absolutely. And, there's special circumstances where you'll hear all the time, somebody who had less than desirable credit, you really want to rent to them. These are one-off situations, and there's things that you can do to protect yourself based on your individual state. And I should say, just since we are recorded, any advice we give you should not be considered legal advice. Anything on taxes, always consult with your tax professional. Some of you are in areas that we are not in and might have laws or ways of doing things that are different than in the DC area. So make sure that you look into that. But there's things that you can do, like a larger security deposit, more references, things like that. But as a whole, especially in this area, if you're going to be a long distance self-managing landlord, you want to place the best possible tenant, because that's how you protect your property. And you never want to rent from a place of desperation where you have to get somebody in it. And that's sometimes the difference between whether you should keep a property as a rental or you should just decide to cut your losses and sell, because you need to be able to have that property sit vacant for 2 or 3 months while you wait for the right tenant. Although personally, before I would do that, I would drop the rent significantly to attract a much larger pool of qualified tenants who might just be outpriced. Before I would let it sit vacant for 3 months. I would rather be a little bit underpriced so I can get some momentum going, but you have to be able to afford it, because otherwise you'll be so desperate to rent it, you'll find yourself compromising your standards, and that's when mistakes happen.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you said that. Yeah, literally, you're saying what's on my mind,
Mhm.
and I think people need to understand too when when issues come up, like you have, a refrigerator goes out and you have to replace an appliance, like, is that going to rock your world? You really need to know yourself. You need to do some self-evaluation on what you can handle, because a lot of people, your mortgage is pretty expensive. Like Diane and I were talking earlier today about setting the rent price to try to cover all of your expenses. I see people say that kind of stuff all the time. Oh, my taxes went up, my property tax went up, therefore my insurance went up, I'm going to raise the rent. Well, there's such a thing as market rent, and then there's your expenses. So those two things don't always correlate. And if you're one of these people that's purchased a property in the last several years when prices really escalated and the market was really crazy and everyone was giving away their third child to get into a house, then you may have a very large payment. And when you go to make that property a rental, your market rate might not cover that. So if that ends up being the case, and this was kind of to the question somebody asked, I think the very first question, you might be in a deficit. Can you handle that deficit? Because there's two things. There's cash flow, and then there's building equity. And you can do, you usually don't do both always at the same time. Sometimes you have no cash flow, but you are building equity. And in our region, the prices continue to go up, but it's, so over time, your wealth is going to grow in equity in that house, but you're not going to have cash flow. Can you handle that? Do you have a pool of cash that you have set aside for that property, for the vacancy, for when the HVAC goes out and you have to replace the system, for all these things that are going to happen? Is it going to rock your world? And if you have vacancy, is that going to rock your world? So that's what you got to really stand back and evaluate.
Right. I mean, there's a reason why when you go to get a mortgage for strictly an investment property, they require you to have a minimum of 3 months reserves, because that's typically what's needed to protect yourself from being in a really bad financial position. When you go to get a mortgage for a primary home, you can have a much larger, debt to income ratio and a much smaller reserve because it's your primary home. But with an investment property, you need that bigger cushion. And so you really, when you're going to convert your primary residence to an investment property, you want to have that same cushion available, even though you might not have been required to have it when you got a mortgage. You really want to have it in the bank, set aside somewhere separate, so that you have that in case of emergency money for each of those properties. Because what if you have, so many of you move like Angie dozens of times, and you might end up with 5 or 6 rental properties across the country. And what if 2 of them are vacant for 3 months at the same time with $3,000 mortgages? You need to make sure you have the $18,000 to back it up. Now, if you do a good job screening your tenants, that's less likely to happen. And there's things you can do to hedge against it. For example, my outgoing tenants always show the property to incoming tenants. So I don't necessarily have downtime. I rarely have more than a week to 10 days of vacancy in my properties. That doesn't mean I only have a week to 10 days in all of them, but typically that's what happens. And that is part of that screening process and having a really good lease that sets you up not just for success in your rental right now, but your long-term success when you're going to turn that property over down the road.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I think that is a good segue into a question that's like the newest one in the chat, but I like the flow of the conversation this way. Does rental risk, it's actually rent risk, Jennifer, have those pre-qualifying questions before they do a formal application already set up, or is that something the landlord needs to do? So
Yeah, the landlord needs to do that, and we can send that out to everybody. But what rent risk does have in the application process, so it's free for you to use as the landlord. And when you go in, you set up your free account, you add your property, it generates an electronic link that you're going to share with applicants. There's a full leasing application they're going to fill out, and it will generate a credit, criminal, and eviction history along with that. They can upload all their financial documents, their photo ID, LES, if they're military, we give instructions on the tenant side of what they need to upload. And then we give you guidance on what to do with the information. So that's where our model and our method comes into play, is that we have a leasing decision worksheet, and we walk you through, what do you look for in the credit? What are the questions to ask? What questions do you ask their previous and current landlords? What kind of income should they have for low risk? And so we tell you we walk you through those pillars of what a person needs to look like.
thank you. Okay, so Diane, you were talking a little bit about this in your questions, and so I thought this would be a good one for you. What is your preferred method in accepting an application? And Angie, you can answer it too when she's done. Do you open your applications for anyone to apply at any point and set a deadline, or do you allow only one application at a time and review on a case-by-case basis?
We see how to answer this with the least amount of words. So listing goes up live on Zillow. Inquiries begin to come in. I have a copy and paste on my notes on my phone with the questions that I need to send back. As soon as somebody's inquiry comes in, I send those questions back. When somebody's questions come in and they look like they're going to be a possible tenant, that they're going to meet my, I lost my words there, but qualifications, yeah, that they're going to, they have a good pre-screening, then I'm going to schedule them for a showing with the current tenant typically. If they're out of the area, the current tenant will do a FaceTime. I try to tell my current tenants I will keep it to no more than 3 to 6 showings if possible, and I'll ask them in advance for some weekends that are good, and I'm going to work to get that scheduled. And then anybody that comes in before this first one sees it and says yes, I'm going to schedule until I get that person that says yes, is typically what I'm doing. I try to be conscientious of both my tenants and their schedules so they don't have to show it a lot of times. And I'm also trying to be conscientious that some people are really ready to move forward and they know if they don't jump, they're going to lose it. And I can get a sense pretty quickly of who that is. So I don't set a deadline. I'm looking at, and I don't screen anybody until I'm pretty confident they're going to pass. Meaning I'm not asking for anybody to pay for a background check. That is not a source of income for me. Okay. I'm not making a profit on these $100 background check application fees. And it infuriates me when people see this as a source of income, because these poor families that are having to apply to 5, 10, 15 houses are out so much money. So I will try not to take more than 2 application fees. My personal moral compass, if I don't accept somebody, I will often, because as a self-managing landlord, I would not say this if you're a company that does it, I will often reimburse their security deposit or their screening fee if I don't move forward with them and they were really qualified and I had to pick between 2, because I feel bad. As military families, we move so much, we absorb so much in these extra costs, but I try not to screen more than 2 at the same time, because it's heartbreaking to have to tell a well-qualified applicant who would be a great fit for your home that I have to turn them away and I'm going with somebody else and I try to make sure the reason I'm going is because they want it for longer or because they applied first and they were otherwise equally qualified.
Yeah, we take a very similar approach. If we, for instance, we just put a property on the market and we got bombarded. It was crazy. We had so many showings. We had several people that applied right off the bat. If it's all in one day, and because ours are coming, we have other agents involved. So we're not able to personally screen everyone who applies on our rental listings, for example. So, but if we have a bunch of applications in hand, we will stop. I'll have agents that contact me and they will ask me, do you have any applications? And I, like on this one, I said, yes, we have 3. They're all very qualified. I wouldn't advise, making your client pay. I had somebody that really wanted their client to apply. And I said, look, I asked the questions about their qualifications to the agent, and it sounded like less than desirable. I said, well, we already have 3 very highly qualified people. So tell your client, I don't want to see her spend her money on that. And it's for very similar reasons, because you'll see people and they're just like, yeah, I had one client who let, I think, 23 people apply for their property. And a ton of them were highly qualified. And to me, that's, again, that's kind of a moral thing for me. I think that's wrong to do to people. As a practical thing, just that has to do with that. When you are going through and you need to decline people for different reasons, we do in Rent Risk, we have an automatic message that you can send people. So if you did have like a handful of people that you needed to answer, you can choose to accept one of the applicants, and then the other options are declined due to multiple application situation. Even if you just had 2 or 3 and you had to decline somebody who was qualified, you can send them a message that they were declined because of a multiple application situation or declined due to credit. And then that message is date and time stamped and goes on their application, so you have a record of it. But it makes it quick. So if you're an agent or you're a property manager of a small portfolio, or you have a bunch of rental properties yourself, it just makes things a little bit more efficient.
Right. And you want to keep it very clean, very businesslike, very unemotional, and very professional.
Yeah, and you want the process to be the same every single time.
Because I don't deviate. And if anybody, my favorite one I often get, well, I want to talk to you before I answer the questions. I simply respond, every single tenant is screened the same way, and I need to have the answers in order to move forward. I have the same system for every tenant. I need to have the answers in order.
People will also ask if they can bring their own credit or provide their own credit report. Don't do that, because credit reports are not all of them are not created equal. They're different. There are different types of credit reports. The reporting is not always up to date or 100% accurate. And so you want to be sure that that you are doing the screening, you're taking them through the process right now. This day and time, credit reports are typically only good for 30 days. And again, the information from one agency to another, there are different standards. There's different credit reporting criteria standards among the credit bureaus. And so the reports can vary wildly from each other. So you don't want to get into a habit of just letting them bring some random report, especially if they do their own, like, what is it, Credit Karma and that type of thing, that you don't accept that.
I completely agree. I will also say, and again, I'm not a subject matter expert on all states. There are some states that do require you to allow somebody that has a credit report dated within 30 days to use it. So like, if you're joining us from another state, make sure you check your state's rules. But also, life leaves clues, and typically those people know they're presenting you with a qualified credit report, and you'll kind of know that they'll know. So,
well, the other thing too, this is super important, because especially if we have people in here with properties in other states, according to the rules for credit and criminal and eviction history, that data that comes from the company that feeds to the credit bureaus, different states have different rules on what can be reported. So you could literally have a legitimate credit report that doesn't have some kind of felony record on it, because that particular state had rules against that being reported, and it blocked that information. So you would even need to do it, depending on what state you're in, you might want to look outside of the credit report or what shows up in a criminal, because some states also have a time period where they can't report anything before, like, say, 5 or 7 years or something like that. So someone could have something really egregious that they've done in the past, but it wouldn't show up. So I've had people come to me before and go, well, this didn't show, I ran this credit report and there was nothing on their criminal history. And I, searched my local court record, and all this stuff came up. Well, it depends on what state they were in, because that information can be blocked. And so, you just be aware of that. But like what Diane said, clues are left. And usually people who have that kind of history will not have great credit. So do me a favor and just don't take people that have a history of bad credit.
Right. Absolutely. I think just to go back for a second and touch on how do you price your rentals. So obviously we have lots of us have access, lots of information. There's a lot of agents out there. It's pretty, you can go on Zillow, you can go on your local MLS, you can see how people are pricing homes, you can see what else is available. I know Angie and I both see this in comments where people want to price their home based on what they think it's worth or what they think they need to cover it. And I can't stress enough, you really want to be competitive in the market, because the kind of person who's going to rent your home, you want somebody with good credit, who's savvy, who's responsible, who's maybe a homeowner themselves in another state and relocating due to whatever their reasons are. They know they're a desirable tenant. And so they are looking for something that's competitively priced and looks nice. So my philosophy is it's always better to be just a tiny bit underpriced than it is to be overpriced, because you can price yourself out of the market into that good quality of tenant. I saw somebody dropped a question in about what do you do with a high-end home or high-end appliances. A lot of those things don't necessarily raise the value of your home as much as you believe. So one of my rentals is in Bethesda, Maryland. It has a steam shower. It has an infrared sauna. It was brand new, renovated. It's fully furnished, beautifully and professionally done. That doesn't mean I'm going to get $1, $2, or $3,000 more a month. They're not necessarily things that people pay for. What it did mean is I had to be really good about making sure my lease was tight and how to manage and maintain those appliances, take care of that home, the things that were expected of that tenant. And I could get a little bit more for it, but not necessarily what I would like to get given how much money is in that home.
Well, you can over renovate for the market also.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem. I've seen that tons of times where, let's take a condo building, for instance. The general rent in a particular condo building might be $2,500, but you've put marble tile in, you've done all of the, you've tricked everything out, and now you want to get 3,500. It's not going to happen. I've seen that situation, and it's just going to sit empty.
Right. And there's a ceiling, especially with bigger homes, where it doesn't, you'll look at the per square footage and you'll think, well, my house is 5,000. I should get what a 2,000 square foot house per square foot gets for 5,000. It doesn't work that way. So they don't go up at that extreme.
So I want to add one thing to this to layer onto what you said, Diane, and you sort of touched on it without actually saying it this way, but a lot of people are under the impression that they need to price their rentals based on whatever the BAH rate is for that area, right? And so since we're mostly military folks on here, I wanted to call that out specifically because you said make sure that it's market rate, right? So sometimes it might line up that way, but there's so many different ranks that are involved with BAH. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to base it off of that. Or conversely, I'm not going to increase my rent every year to match that either. You've got to look at your market rate. That is something that gets brought up in all the forums every year, every time, every December when the rates come out.
Yes, I'm thrilled. I no longer have to stock the forums for what the current rate is from my own mortgage. So I do believe in raising your rent on a fairly regular basis. You could find, especially if you have a long-term tenant, that they are paying so much below market. It builds resentment. You want them paying a fair rate, but I still want them to be on the lower end because it's significantly more for me to replace a tenant than it is to absorb a lower increase. So my leases generally have a 2-year start. So I sign 2-year leases initially. Everything, of course, has SACRA. And then it has a built-in 3 to 5% increase if they want to do a renewal. A lot of my tenants ask for renewals for 3 and 4 years. And then if I know the tenant is moving within a year, they're expected to have PCS orders. Often I won't even raise the rent because what's an extra $50 or $100? It might make a big difference to them. It doesn't change my whole bottom line. And chances are when they move in 12 months, I'm going to get so much more in rent that the way that rents are going up, it makes up for it. So kind of that's my philosophy and what I do. If I know someone's going to be there for, I have a tenant that's been in my Mount Vernon property for 10 years. I just do it on a 2-year cycle. Every 2 years, he's at a 5% increase, just about 4 or 5%, and he signs a new 2-year lease because, a year goes fast. And I don't want people looking at an increase every single year because it's just, I wouldn't want to do that.
And 5% is very reasonable.
Right.
That's not that much money. If you do a quick math calculation, it's
Right.
not that much. Yeah.
Okay, so we're at the point now that we need to make sure that we're getting to the questions that people have asked. So now it's my turn to make sure we clean up our chat and our Q&A. And thank you, Diane. I know you covered several of these already, and I did get the one that came in through email. I'll just go top to bottom. Thank you guys for this webinar. My question is, once you get to Q&A, do you invest in break-even properties? PCSing in July, and it's hard to find a home nowadays with high interest rates where mortgage matches market rent, which we sort of just talked about. Barely going to break even with my current house, and that's with self-managing. And so this is like a lot of what we talk about, like these reluctant landlords, right?
Right. So
Yeah,
I definitely do, but go ahead, Angie.
Oh, no. Well, I was just going to say that's usually the situation because you're not buying your own property with the same margins you would as if you were an investor. So if you want to make money and have cash flow, you're going to have to purchase that house at the right price or have a whole lot of money down on it. So, a lot of times you're going to be in the red.
Right. So I definitely manage my portfolio for full-time income. Okay. So I tend to buy properties that I'm going to be cash flow positive on. However, that doesn't mean I won't buy a home that I'm going to break even on, but I'm going to make sure that I feel like it's in an area that's going to appreciate, that it's in an area that I'm going to have a very tight, easy turnover. So this area is great for that because generally you can turn them over. I'm going to make sure that I have a healthy savings account that just to cover any unexpected expenses. And even at a break even, they are paying your mortgage and there is equity pay down in that mortgage. So you are actually still turning a profit. I was talking to Angie and Julie in our dry run, and I said my very first property, the first time I went to do taxes, I thought I only had to pay taxes on the $12,000 in profit above and beyond my expenses. I just assumed that I wrote off the whole mortgage because this was 17 years ago. I wasn't a tax nerd like I am now. And then I was surprised to find out the $600 or $700 a month that I had in principal pay down was also considered profit. So I was really paying income tax on more like $18,000 because I didn't know. But now, of course, I understand, oh yeah, it's all profit because somebody's paying down your mortgage. But I was young and naive too.
So for me personally, I want to share a little bit of my personal
Yeah.
story. So our very first home that we ever bought was like a mile from where I live right now. It's just Manchester Lakes. And we had a baby and we were moving to Hawaii. And this property was going to need new carpeting and new paint and a new roof and all the things. And I was just not in a position to even think about wanting to manage that remotely. So we sold it, and it was at the time of the market. This was 2002. So things were pretty good. I mean, we'd like doubled our money in 18 months, 2 years. So that was good. And it took me until our fourth house until I finally was like, oh, we bought this because I want to move back to it. Right. So then when we did move away, we did rent it out. And I did things a little differently. The first year I lived here, so I was able to list it myself and I screened the people. I didn't know what I was doing. I got lucky. It was a military family. They took great care of it. And then when I had to turn it over the second year, I hired a realtor to list it for me, but then I still self-managed it. And then I moved back into it. And so for me, it worked out great. And I saved, not having to pay for a property manager. But if it was more than 2 years, I don't know if I would have wanted to continue that way. And I think, there's a lot of us out there that are like that kind of like ease into it. I was a little older. I had owned several properties at that point, and I felt like I was in a better position to be able to manage this myself. But when I was younger and I had 2 kids and my husband was deployed all the time, forget it. I could not handle mentally doing one more thing. So
Right.
I know that there's a lot of folks out there like
And that is okay. Like
it
it's
is okay.
okay to
And that's
not
why
want Right. I haven't kept every house I have bought. I have not kept every house that has been a rental. One of the questions in here, which I don't know that we'll have time to get to capital gains, but I had a great rental in Florida from when we were stationed there, and it had gone up a lot of money in rent and in value. And I made the decision strategically to sell it because I had a window where I'd pay very little in capital gains, and to me that was worth the trade-off of having to do a 4,500 square foot worth of paint and carpet and potentially give up the capital gains protections that I had. So you want to look at every house independently. And if you're moving to this area and you're buying a house and you already know you can break even with it on rent, you're probably going to be in a pretty decent position that 3 years from now, the rent market's going to go up a little bit and maybe you'll get a little bit more. I don't know that I would choose to keep a house that was really negative, where there's commas and lots of zeros, because that, you might get tired of paying for that after a while. I do, at this point in my career, I do usually carry one or two loss leaders that run at a negative because it works with the number of properties that I have and I can buy strategically. But as a general rule, I am buying knowing that they're going to be at least cash flow neutral, if not cash flow positive, or I'm buying a fixer upper that I'm going to have equity in. So I know I'm going to make, it's going to be a good position in my portfolio down the road.
Mhm.
So there's a question in here in the chat from Liz, Angie, and you might want to like talk to her offline. What is the best way to go about switching property managers in North Carolina? We want the contract terminated. Background, the property management company defaulted on the contract by signing a lease outside of their scope over 1 year without our approval. Also, we did things like conduct repairs well above the authorized level for not getting our approval. These are just some of their grievances.
Yeah, I read that. So what I would do first is read your contract and see what the lease break clause says. That's always where people need to start, is with what your contract says. And then I would just go to them and just say, hey, I'm not happy because in writing, because you've done X, Y, and Z, and I would like to terminate the contract with no penalty. If they did breach, if they did, a material breach of the contract, then, usually, and this is the benefit of working with a real estate brokerage or property management company, is because there are agencies, the real estate board for that state, you can report issues to them and you can file grievances. And so you have a little bit of leverage. That takes me to another point that I didn't write down earlier about screening management companies. Please make sure they have a license for your state. Some states don't require a license, but there are a lot of scammers out there, a lot of scam companies that will take the funds and run. They'll take the security deposits, they'll take the rent, you won't see it, and they'll run. So make sure that the people that you're hiring are legitimate. It's just a little.
So in Virginia, there are rules about this.
Yes, very strict rules in Virginia.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. So this question's for you, Diane. What was the tipping point that made you decide to go with a property management company for your 1 out of 13?
Of my 13, 2 are Airbnbs and 1 is a long-term rental, primarily targeted at relocating folks, and insurance claims. One of the 2 Airbnbs is in Oregon. Its typical stay is a 3-night stay, often weddings or girls' weekends. And there was no chance that I wanted my phone ringing at 1 o'clock in the morning because somebody couldn't learn how to use the electronic keypad. And for that particular property manager, she's probably one of the highest priced Airbnb property managers in the country. She is worth every penny and I am happy to pay it. But that was it. And it also is in a more tenant friendly state. So I really wanted somebody that was familiar with the laws, but mostly, unlike my more local Airbnb in Old Town, I didn't want to have to coordinate the housekeeper coming and whether or not, somebody's kid had marker on the sheets. Like I had somebody do that for me. That was my tipping point on that one.
Okay, so do you have any suggestions for tools for property setup to keep track of security deposits from tenants?
You need to have a separate account. Those are escrow funds, so you need to put it in separate from your personal funds.
Yeah, and check with your state. Some states like Maryland require you to have it in a Maryland-based bank and you have to pay interest on it. Other states like Virginia just want you to have it in a separate account. Some states, every account needs to be separate per property. Other states are like, as long as it's in a separate savings account, you're good.
Yeah.
So
But keeping track of it, I will, just my own tip, in addition to what's in the lease, I do keep a copy of the, whatever they send me, the regular check or the cashier's check. My houses that rent 6 months in advance, I don't require a cashier's check. I have plenty of time to figure out if that check's going to bounce when they're not moving in for 6 months. But I do keep a separate copy of that. And I prefer that those payments not be sent electronically. The initial security deposit and first month's rent, it's my preference, so I can have easy copies. My mom worked in a law firm, so I like copies of everything.
And if you're within 2 weeks of someone moving in, don't take a personal check. It needs to
No.
be certified funds 100%.
No, yes, must be.
Even if they pay electronically, they can pull those
Pull it
funds
back.
back. It still takes several days for electronic funds to clear. That's not instant. So
Mhm.
you might get the transfer, but then they can be pulled back. They can file they can protest the payment or whatever after it's a whole scam. So be very careful about that.
And again, if you're managing one property and some of these things are happening to you, be nervous. These are weird situations when people are like, I want to move in right now. Oh, the bank is too far. It's all a red flag.
Anytime somebody's trying to push you, you always want to screen every person 18 and older, because you need to know who's going into the property. And if they say, well, this person's not going to contribute financially, I say it doesn't matter. Everybody 18 and over gets screened, because it's also you need to know criminally, is there something you don't want in your property? And then, like I said earlier, it's an indication of how well they're going to take care of the property. So if someone has bad credit, even if a financially responsible person has great credit, for me, everybody has to meet a requirement on credit.
Right. And I mean, my leases have things in them, like if a guest is staying more than 10 days, I want to know about it. I think I've recently changed it to 14 days. You want to make sure that you are protecting and that you know who is in your home. My leases even say if you're going to be vacant, away from the home for over a certain amount of time, just to let me know, so I know the house is vacant, and it specifies the temperature the house needs to stay on the high and the low end, because there are people who are not savvy and will think, well, I'm going to be gone in the winter or the summer, and I'm just going to turn the HVAC off, and they're going to come home to a house full of mold. I've never had it happen because I know it can happen, so it's been in my lease since the beginning.
It can also happen if you close the vents in the basement. Your basement can get moldy.
Yeah, absolutely. I specify only natural waste can go down the toilets. Nothing, no matter what it says on the packaging, can go down there, because otherwise you're completely responsible for any clogs.
So in the chat, Angie, there's a question from Karen, and she was asking about her qualification requirements for her Zillow property in San Antonio, or Diane too. I did not click on the link to see what it said.
Yeah, I don't really want to go to an external link, but right now.
But I definitely will tell you, if you drop that in the military landlords page, or you'll get a lot of feedback real quick.
Yeah, actually,
drop it in there and then tag us. So
yeah, and then we'll look at it.
Or put it in GAMS and tag them in there too.
Yeah,
because people do love to give feedback. They'll give you feedback.
Yeah, happy to do that. Okay, and then there's a question about the cost of rent risk.
Yeah, thank you for getting to that question. So yes, there are sites out there that will, like TransUnion Smart Move, you can pay 20 or 30 bucks and just do a basic credit report. Again, it's the quality of the data that you're getting. We use Experian's Vantage model, which is the highest quality of data and accuracy of data. The other thing that you're getting with Rent Risk is they're uploading all of their financial documents. So the cheaper sites is just a basic credit report. You usually have to add for criminal, and they also don't always have the ability to upload all the financial documents, their photo ID, and have the leasing application there. So you're not just getting the reports, you're getting the full leasing application, you're getting all the features that you can use in the product, and you're also getting the guidance that teaches you what to do with the information. So you'll see application fees that can go into the hundreds. So $60 is, it's actually $59. It's, you know, big a dollar discount there, but that's actually pretty normal for the market. The other thing is, gosh, I had one more thought about that. Oh, the other thing that we also have is the ability to do enhanced screening. So let's say you get several applications and they're all really good, but you want to do, you're trying to decide between applicants. You can choose some enhanced screening options like asset verification, bank account information through Plaid, and you can add those later in the process if you want to add more enhanced options.
Quick question, just for me, Angie, do you allow both the landlord or the tenant to pay for that? Do you have an option?
We do.
Okay.
We do. We do. And we have the, I mentioned this earlier today with Diane, we have the two-step process. So if you're in Montgomery County, Maryland, or you're in DC, and then there's another county in Illinois, that there's a two-step process to the screening, which means that you can't look at the criminal until you look at their credit and their credit report and their income qualification standards, and you want to move forward with that person. Whoever you move forward with, then you can request for them to release their criminal report to you. Because within rent risk, there's some legal acknowledgments and disclosures that are also built in for everyone's protection. And then the applicant has to take an additional step to click a share button with you with their personal, with their credit report. So, and the final thing that I wanted to say about rent risk and how we're different from our competitors is the ease of use and the way that we, the user experience and the way that we display the information. It's very easy to understand. It's very clean, and it's very efficient in the dashboard with how it presents. People that use it, that have used other products, really love it.
Thank you for sharing that. So Doug asked a question, and we are not going to get into timelines for selling capital gains on this call because that's sort of outside the scope of being a self-managing landlord. We're not really talking about sales. So thank you for engaging and for your question. So Carrie asks about the property rate, what you set for your rate, and are you including the HOA fees inside of that or outside of it? And in the Nova market this summer, how much before your PCS should you start listing your home?
Well, if you're PCSing this summer, you could have listed it like 6 months ago. So you can definitely put it out there early if you're listing it yourself. Next best time is today. Things like HOA, no, you don't add that. That's just a landlord expense. You don't add that to the rent. The rent is whatever the market rate is for that property. Anything else that has to be paid, that's your expense.
Mm-hmm.
So Carrie, I'm just going to add my little plug in on this side. If you have a lot of questions like that, that is when it is a great idea to interview a couple of real estate agents. Then they can help you set that rental price amount and put it on the market for you. It gives you a wider, you can do it yourself if you're comfortable. But you know, I've done it both ways. The first time I did it myself, I put it on GAMS and I put it on military by owner, and the eventual tenant actually came from MPO. And then the second time I was out of the area and couldn't handle the showings myself, I paid for a realtor and she listed it on the MLS and on military by owner, and they came through the MLS. So anyway, that was my little plug on that. All right, we answered that one. I always include the HOA in my rent. Okay, you put that in there. That was Diane. I went through Turbo Tenant to do the screening for our Carlsbad, California property. Is there anything I need to be aware of when I use this service?
I haven't used it, so I can't
I
comment.
don't know about Turbo Tenant either.
What was it? Tell me where I'm trying to find this again.
I went through Turbo Tenant to do the screening for our property in Carlsbad. Is there anything I need to be aware of when I use this service?
I really am not going to say anything negative about a competitor. I would just say, you know, I would try a few, you know, try some other options. I think it's really important that you do a comprehensive screening, and Turbo Tenant, I don't believe, does that. That's the only thing that I can say about that.
Alyssa will be PCSing to the Pentagon area and looking hopefully to purchase our third home. Our previous two are now rentals and would like to eventually rent this home when PCS time comes again. Can you all offer any suggestions? So I think that's probably one that's going to require a little bit more conversation. But
Well,
and
I would say before you buy a home, I don't know if you're working with a realtor or not, but one of the things I do for my clients is we look at the rental rates, what they currently are. So you need to run your numbers. If you're working with a lender, they need to run the numbers on what your payment's going to look like, and then what does that neighborhood pull in rent currently? And you can anticipate maybe an increase, but sometimes there's not an increase. Sometimes the rents will stay the same. They don't automatically go up. It's highly local, based on your neighborhood even. So,
and I don't know what this market is going to look like, right? We don't really know. Like when I bought our I guess it was technically our third house, but our second house in this area in 2007, like who knew what the market was going to do? And it took me 6 years before we could refinance it. And it was 10 years before we sold it when we moved away. So crazy things can
Yeah,
happen.
I mean, I think a good rule of thumb is to always, when you're making a major purchase like a home, you want to have multiple exit strategies. And one of the things that has kept me safe as I've bought and sold over the years, and I apply this even now as I've got two projects under construction that I'm going to renovate and sell, one here, one in Stafford, one Springfield, is when you buy, have multiple exit strategies. So don't buy for mythical appreciation. Don't buy counting that the rents are going to go up. Buy the house that you can afford, that you like, that's a good quality, that's good schools, that's going to make you happy, and already look at, what's going to happen if you have to sell it in 3 years? Can you afford to take that hit? What's going to happen if you have to move in a year and rent it at today's rent? Can you afford to do that? And that's what's going to really keep you safe long term when
but
That's the key right there, what you just said.
the interesting thing, and you need to be really conservative because, for instance, right now, one of the things that's happening in the rental market, I'm sorry, the real estate market, the sales market in Northern Virginia is properties are sitting on the market a lot longer and they're having to drop prices in order to move the property. There are pockets where there are multiple offer situations, but right now the median days on market is 52 for Fairfax County. It's very similar for Alexandria City and Arlington, and the average price drop is $51,000. So you've got to be really careful if you're listing your property right now. If you came tonight and you listen to this information, and you go, okay, this is not for me, I might need to sell. I mean, I would say you need to talk to a qualified real estate professional if that's your realtor. If your realtor has good experience in sales as well as rentals, they need to have a comprehensive knowledge and experience in both markets. And you need to ask those questions. That could be a whole other webinar on how to screen for a real estate agent, because many of them, 75% of them, don't even sell one house in a year. So you need a professional real estate agent, not someone who does it part-time. But you need to look at these numbers and you need to understand the dynamics in the market right now. And if you're going to sell your property, you've got to price it correctly. You can't price it back what it was in 2021 or 2022. It's a different market right now.
Data matters. This is what I'm hearing. The theme of a lot of what Angie's saying is data matters. The data on your tenants, the data on the property manager, the data on your potential real estate agent, pricing your house. It's all about the data.
It's asking questions, getting information. Yes, knowing, going on hard facts, not on emotions, not on feelings, not on what you think, because that could be way off. And you'll get yourself in trouble that way. And I'm saying that from personal experience. It's taken me a lot of years to get to this point where from personal experience and then professionally and all the people that I see, I have dealt with thousands of people over the last 12 years. In the Northern Virginia market and thousands of rental applications. Like I look at data all the time. I look at real estate market data. So, you really have to educate yourself. And I applaud everybody for showing up tonight because that's what you're trying to do. And so good for you guys.
So do you guys have just a few more minutes? Because this has been very popular and there's a lot of questions left.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think we answered part of Lena's questions in the Q&A. But the the second one she asked was, what about determining what comps to base your rent from? We have a high-end home with 50K in appliances and are concerned with finding tenants. I think you answered that. And then the other thing she asked was, does it make sense in adding creature comfort effects that help the property, like adding an HVAC humidifier to control expansion for hardwood floors, or a heater blower to the fireplace to manage the overuse of the HVAC? I don't think these types of things increase home value, but make the home more comfortable, and impacts of humidity has on a home.
Humidity can do a lot of damage. I mean, I see this all the time in our management company. I think that's something very important you need to consider for your property in our area because of
Okay.
mold.
Awesome. Jenna Mann says, military spouse in Nova, also a mortgage lender, and she came for info and always loved to learn more. Thanks us. Got the same from Marissa and Facebook. Thank you for the webinar. It was very helpful. All right, question. In the next 2 to 3 years, we are going to be self-managing our property in Nova and leaving the state. Do you have any recommendations for a designated agent that only works during turnovers? We would not need anyone to market the property or screen applicants. We would handle that role. We would just need someone dependable who could show the property to prospective tenants and be there to let maintenance personnel and cleaners in and out as needed during turnovers. Any recommendations are appreciated.
Well, that's that's considered property management, doing those things. So you have to use a licensed real estate professional in Virginia.
Yeah, I can tell you that when I needed a registered agent in DC, my CPA, who lived there, was my registered agent, but was not doing any of the maintenance or turnover or anything like that, just simply receiving paperwork during a time that I needed it.
And those are two different things.
Correct, yeah.
There's a registered agent that you must have legally, and you have to file that with the State Corporation Commission if you're not a resident of Virginia. But then what you're talking, I think what this person's talking about is having an agent to conduct sort of like, and I call it co-management.
Yeah, that is a property manager that handles the turnover.
Yeah, most property managers are not going to do a la carte services like that because they're just too busy servicing their full service clients. You might be able to work with a realtor on that, but again, it just depends on what you're asking them to do because there's rules about that too if they're not a real estate broker.
So and what I did when I listed my rental, the second time I hired an agent and I paid them a 1-month fee, and they showed the property for me at turnover and handled whatever needed to be handled. And then they turned it back over to me for self-managing. So that's what I would suggest in this case, but I don't.
Yeah, and again, personal experience, I'm not a licensed agent. I am not a licensed property manager. My properties here in this area do not need a lot of attention between tenants because I have great tenants. So I don't know if you joined later, but for example, my outgoing tenants show the property to prospective incoming tenants and also handle their own maintenance tasks. I don't go to the property to handle that. So while there might be a situation where you do need to let people in, that might be a situation that you do come in person and do that and make an in-person visit during your turnover time, which is likely deductible on your taxes. Check with your tax professional. That would be one way, but you would still need a registered agent separate that receives paperwork on your behalf.
Thank you. So Christina wants to know, how do you make your lease?
Diane, why don't you answer that one? Because we use a legal, Virginia.
I hire an attorney for my initial lease in a state. I hire a real estate attorney or contracts attorney to do the initial lease in the state. And that's what I would recommend. And it's not a huge investment to have an attorney do it for you.
It's worth it because that's the next domino.
Right. You want to have a lease. We could have a whole other seminar of all the unique things we have in our leases after all of these years because somebody has shown us we need to put it in writing.
Yeah.
So Gail asks about command properties. If you manage properties outside of the National Capital Region, she wants to know about San Diego because they have a place in San Diego.
If you know someone who would like to start a command properties in San Diego with my help, that's actually a goal that I have. But no, right now I don't. But I do have a partner in Tampa. So we do have a command properties branch. It's not owned by me, but I help start that company. And we have a business relationship.
Okay, so Amy wants to know, how do you approach having a maintenance tech on standby for emergencies when managing from afar?
So I'm assuming this is if you're self-managing. And so if you've lived in the home before you move out of the area, chances are you have a list of preferred vendors. Like I have a preferred plumber, HVAC, handyman. And so I have them and they're my authorized providers, and they will coordinate with the tenant to handle whatever has come up. And because obviously I am saving money, I save by not paying property management fees, I can afford to pay them very well and to make sure I hire really good providers in order to take care of those things. So if you have a good kind of book of people that took care of your home when you were there, that's going to transfer and they'll handle it for you when you're gone.
So Angie, do you want to talk about what that looks like if you used command properties to handle your property with if
Yeah,
an
I mean,
emergency came up?
we basically are the 24/7 emergency point of contact for the tenants, and we have partner vendors. We have third party. We don't have any internal, people who work direct as employees, but we use third party vendors that we have used for a very long time. They're vetted, they're quality. We trust them. They have insurance. They show up. They do a great job. And that we would handle all of that.
Right. So it's the same, right? Angie and I are both hiring really good people, and we're hiring the kind of plumbers and electricians that really care about their work and are not there to take advantage of a situation and are going to do their best to diagnose it.
Yeah, we don't, I mean, if we sense anything like that with our vendors, we won't use them anymore because we're a fiduciary for our owners. And so we're trying to protect their bottom line. And we also, with our vendors, we determine if it was something that was caused by the tenant, because you shouldn't pay for anything that was tenant negligence, like, Diane, like stuffing the flushable wipes that really aren't flushable, and then you've got a huge plumbing problem now. That type of thing is going to be passed on to the tenant, that they'll have to pay for that expense if they caused it. So
right. I had a thought and then I lost it on, oh yeah. And I think I said this, my tenants coordinate the repair. So while I might make the initial call and have the final say on authorizing what can be repaired and at what cost, ultimately my tenants meet with those repair professionals. And again, I'm renting to people who may have owned their own home at one time, take very good care of the home. And so they're vested in making sure it gets done and gets done well. And they're appreciative. It's one of the reasons I don't use a home warranty, because I don't want my tenants to have to wait for service. So the only two instances in which I've ever used a home warranty is when my mother was my tenant, and then I had a family member that was a tenant and they could manage the home warranty process. Otherwise, I don't ever want my tenant to have to wait 4 days to get the air conditioning fixed, or, have to wait.
If you're doing 4 days, you're really lucky, because I've seen repeatedly 6 to 8 weeks in the middle of summer when it's 107 degrees. So please don't get a home warranty. Just save the money. It's a racket.
Right. Oh my gosh, if I paid for a home warranty annually on all my properties, it would probably be more than I pay in repairs total annually on all of my properties, just for the premiums.
So Alyssa is asking for your Facebook or Instagram accounts, whichever way people want to connect with you too. So LinkedIn, whatever. If you want to share your social handles that you want people on here to be able to connect with you, drop them in the chat, please. A couple people have asked about a lease webinar, and I'm not sure about that, but I don't really know how widely that would be popular or not, because it's really hard to do that with every state being a little different. Okay, I joined late, so maybe this was covered, but what platforms are recommended for accepting rent payments when self-managing? So bonus points for platforms that have additional features, communications with tenant, work orders, etc. So I think that sounds like RentRest to me.
Yeah, That is rent risk. So obviously we started with tenant screening and then we expanded to allow rent payments. We have higher daily limits. Our daily limits are 5,000 a day. And you can set that up. You don't have to use the tenant screening. You can go in and use any of the other features that you want. And then invite your tenant to pay rent. And then we also have a maintenance portal. So if you don't want your tenant texting you at 11 o'clock at night, you can give the tenant instructions on how you want maintenance issues to be handled, and you can handle it all through the rent risk maintenance portal. And everything's recorded in there, so you can communicate back and forth, and you can add your invoices there so that you can keep track of those if just for consolidating your expenses and things like that. In the future, we're always adding features. And so one of the big things that we're going to do in the future is link it to like QuickBooks and things like that for people who have more than one property and need that feature.
Awesome. A lot of people are saying thank you for the information. So one last question here, it looks like. Karen wants to know your pre-screening questions and non-negotiable requirements when screening. What are your pre-screening questions? That's a lot.
I mean, I would say we could drop my pre-screening questions that I send ahead of time later. I mean, I know for me, it's generally a 675 or 700 credit score and 3.5 times the rent and income. Like if you're talking about some basic guidelines.
Okay. Yeah, we go by 3 times the rent for monthly income. We want to see good credit. We don't give a number because sometimes people can have a number in the 700s and still have some late payments, and they can also be highly leveraged with as it compares to their income. So I just tell people we don't want to see late payments or accounts and collections or evictions and things like that on their credit report, and then they have to have good rental history.
Mm-hmm. And I'm always, for those of you that are calling prior landlords, my dad years and years ago told me it's not really the landlord they're leaving you want to call. It's the one before that you want to call, because that's who's going to be honest because they're already out of their house.
Exactly.
It applies more when you're moving.
You want to get that information on their, on the leasing application that you use, not just the current landlord, but the previous one.
Landlords, yeah.
All right, one last question for you, Angie. I lied. There's more. Alyssa, I have a property management for one of our homes in Suffolk, and I've been sourcing many of the vendors when maintenance is needed because I haven't been having a great experience this year with their communication. Any advice for a new PM or how to request a lower PM percentage? Because I've been doing a lot of research for vendors to do due to their slow moving.
Okay, so you're saying you do have a property manager, but you're having to step in and do things. Well, that's unsat, as we say in the Navy. You shouldn't be doing anything. I would get a new property manager.
Yeah, and just my personal, I would not try to request a lower property managed percentage because they're clearly not earning what they have. They're probably not going to earn that much either. I would follow the terms of your agreement with the property manager, break it, and find a new property manager that's going to take care of your home, because you should feel like the money you're spending on property management is money well spent because it's making your life easier.
Yeah, and to add to that, for people who are looking to pay the cheapest possible thing for property management, you need to find the right person, because even if they're more expensive, because if you get the wrong person and you're shopping just because it's the cheapest, it can cost you far more. Not in time in this example, but also in money, because if they're not maintaining the property, they're not doing their job, they've got low standards, they're not screening tenants to a high standard, that can cost you tens of thousands of dollars.
Well, and I know we're really coming up on time, but the same applies to who you're paying to fix your home. So I do see people who complain about what the cost is for a plumbing visit or an electrical visit, and you're trying to send, I'm sure nobody on this webinar would do this, but the cheapest possible person to your home. This is not the time. This is a $500,000 plus investment for most of us. You want to send somebody who's good. You don't need the most expensive. You need good quality. I love smaller local vendors that really care about their work, because a plumbing repair done wrong can cost you tens and even hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage and create insurance nightmares for you and your tenants. So this is not the time to coupon clip your way to having plugs and switches fixed.
And if that's something that if that's the mindset you have, then you really need to ask yourself if you need to be a landlord.
Right.
And that's just that sounds really blunt, but that really is
Right.
kind of the cold, hard truth.
Right. You can't get top rent and top tenants and then do things cheaply.
It won't end well.
Mm-mm. And if it's worked for you so far, just lucky you. I wouldn't take a chance.
Yeah.
I'm not that big. I'm a gambler, but not like that.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for spending your Monday night with us and our GAMS National Capital Region Military Spouses folks. I know that you two both are very gracious with your time and your expertise. And if people want to reach out more, they can also always submit questions into the group because we always have such great answers for people in there. So thank you both very much. This was very enlightening. Sorry we went over. I guess I should have booked it for longer than an hour. People had a lot of questions. So that's
Thanks
awesome.
for having us. This was fun.
It was so fun. I love it.
Happy to share.
All right.
Anyway,
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, Julie. Angie, it was so great to meet you through this.
Good to meet you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for
Thanks,
coming,
everyone.
everybody.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. All right. Ending the live video. And stop recording.